Now we are sharing an insights for the global peace and global responsibility. Now we are rolling into the session 3. This is the day 1 of the Kim Dae-jung Peace Forum. And in session 3, we will have 1 moderator and 2 speakers. And also, I see a lot of feedbacks coming on from on-site and online. The session 3 will be discussed under the establishment of international cooperation system of science and technology for peace. The moderator is Sook-kyoung, professor from Korea Institute of Energy Technology. And we have 2 speakers, Rachel Bronson, president and CEO of Bulletin of Atomic Scientists, and Sang-ook, professor of Seoul National Universities. Let's get them on the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome them with a warm round of applause.
Right, hello, good afternoon. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, you have last session, so please wait a little bit, right? Okay. Welcome to session 3. The topic of session 3 is the establishment of international cooperation system in science and technology for peace. It is my actually great honor to be here and to meet all of you. Thank you very much for inviting me as a chair. And actually, this is the time of the Nobel Prize, right? This year, we also have winners in 3 different fields of science: physiology, medicine, and physics and chemistry. Why I am talking to you Nobel Prize? Because in person, I have a special chance to meet President Kim Dae-jung in 2002 in a special exhibition arranged by the Nobel Foundation. It was a great exhibition, touring exhibition, and it also held in Korea. So I have an honor to be there to meet President Kim Dae-jung. So this event is very special for me to come to this place. And right, and please wait, okay. And my name is Sook-kyoung Jo, and as introduced by the person, I'm working at Kentech University, Korea Institute of Energy Technology as a professor, and I'm teaching Minerva course for 4 semesters now. So we are talking Minerva innovation many times, but if you have any question about Minerva, then I can tell you, right? After the Industrial Revolution, we humans have enjoyed many benefits thanks to advance in science and technology. But as in the blockbuster movie, the Oppenheimer, yes, and the Manhattan Project made the world realize how important the peaceful use of science and technology. So this is the topic of our session. How can we internationally collaborate to enhance peace for the use of science and technology? Right, we have 2 prestigious speakers today. So let me introduce kindly Rachel Bronson. Yes, please give me a speech. And Rachel Bronson is the president and CEO of the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists. Right, let's give a big applause to her.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the opportunity and the honor to speak before this very distinguished group. I'd like to express my appreciation to the governor and mayor and other Korean dignitaries who have made today possible. In particular, I'd like to thank Haksun Pak for my invitation today, and thank you to the translators who will have a difficult time when I change my remarks from my prepared script. So please be patient with them. So far, I can report the Korean to English translation has been excellent. I was asked to speak about the role of the scientific community in global cooperation, a topic that could promote or prompt some despair. Both the scientific community and global cooperation are under, as we know, intense pressure at a moment when we need each to be thriving. Once a revered community, scientists and experts have come under intense pressure in recent years. Books such as Sean Autumn's War on Science and reports on the war on or the death of expertise document the pressure under which scientists and experts operate. Sorry, I just lost my place. The pillaring of climate scientists and public health experts in the United States provide real-life anecdotes about the consequences of such trends. A Pew Research study fielded in 2020 before the pandemic showed that only 14% of South Koreans said they have a lot of trust in scientists to do what is right, the lowest among 20 countries surveyed. A recent survey of Americans by the American Survey Center showed a 15% decrease in how much Americans trust science between the years 2019 and 2023. This is problematic given that today's most important questions are prompted by fast-moving scientific innovation, and scientists will be key to guiding our path forward. We will need scientists, tech leaders, and many others to help us devise global responses to the scientific and technological innovations that are promising significant benefits, but also risking real harms. For example, it is getting easier to identify and create dangerous pathogens, build large language generative artificial intelligence models that replicate and deepen existing structural biases, erode normal privacy provisions, introduce new autonomous weapons into military arsenals, and easier to rely on controversial geoengineering to manage our climate change. We will need scientists and tech leaders to help us lead the way to a safer future. But just as trust in science and experts is under pressure, so is our ability to manage global challenges cooperatively. The war in Ukraine, which has come to pit Russia versus the West again, is a nail in the coffin of a global architecture that was built during an earlier time and is struggling to keep pace. The rise of a more muscular China puts additional pressure on the system. Not only are we struggling to govern technologies from an earlier time, the nuclear landscape is in complete disarray, for example, but we are not keeping up with newer technologies that bring with them their own challenges and opportunities. So I was asked to speak about this topic because of the storied history of the organization that I lead. The Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists was founded by Manhattan Project scientists who created the atom bomb and then advocated to limit the spread of such weapons and the destructive power of the technology they had created. Scientists such as J. Robert Oppenheimer, the subject of the current blockbuster movie, and many others. My organization was created explicitly to engage the public on scientific innovation, particularly the then new nuclear technologies, and to provide an outlet for scientists to engage with policy formation and anticipate new technologies that were on the horizon that had the potential to end life on Earth as we know it. Today, we closely track at the Bulletin the developments in nuclear risk, climate change, and new disruptive technologies, particularly artificial intelligence and biotechnologies. But today, I will focus my remarks on the issue that directly speaks to the importance of the scientific communities and international cooperations, artificial intelligence, and the need for global guardrails and what lessons we can draw from the nuclear arms control and risk reduction. We heard this morning from Lord Anthony Giddens, who discussed the new historical space we are living in. He focused on artificial intelligence and geopolitics as areas that President Kim Dae-jung cared deeply about, and I am pleased to be able to focus on it today. Once limited, as we saw, to games like chess and Go, the advancement of AI is undergoing rapid transformation. We know that AI will bring huge benefits. It will help us identify patterns to thwart diseases, protect us in many different ways, and even regenerate failing ecosystems. But we're also beginning to see the contours of the great harms it may bring by widening gaps between the haves and have-nots, radically altering global health models and altering how we define and defend security, among many other concerns. Just last week at the opening of the UN General Assembly, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres said, and he quoted, that generative artificial intelligence holds much promise, but it may also lead us across a Rubicon and into more danger than we can control. The Secretary General is working to establish a high-level advisory board on AI with the aim of creating a new UN agency devoted to it. European leaders are following suit and are working to create similar bodies that address new challenges posed by AI through the European Union. The US is quite behind on this. Tech leaders themselves are telling us that we are only at the beginning of the AI revolution, and they too are quite worried. Thousands of leading AI experts and policy watchers recently signed a petition drafted by the Future of Life Institute calling for a pause in AI development and greater AI regulation. And as we just saw from the previous presentation, Geoffrey Hinton, the godfather of AI, left Google to speak freely about his growing concerns about the risk of AI. This is why AI is often said to be having its Oppenheimer moment, a reference to Robert Oppenheimer, the father of the atomic bomb, who worked tirelessly to try to contain the spread of technologies that he and his fellow scientists created. There is a growing fear that with new technologies, the creator of today's AI algorithms are releasing something wild into the ecosystem that they cannot contain. And as Geoffrey Hinton has stated about AI, quote, "It's hard to see how you can prevent the bad actors from using it for bad things." But scientists like Oppenheimer didn't just sound the alarm. They worked tirelessly to create new information sharing communities, or what academics call epistemic communities, to track and constrain technology's spread. They created publications to argue for and against particular strategic approaches. They created organizations to document the effects of nuclear war, to build public support against it. In doing so, they set the global foundations for future arms control agreements and confidence-building measures that came to fruition decades later in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. They spawned new verification techniques that made arms control more possible, and they helped limit the spread of nuclear weapons from what many expected to be 25 nuclear states to 5 and now 9. So what can we learn from our predecessors that might be helpful to us today? Is there anything we can take from their efforts? First, let's be clear about a few of the many things that are different today in the technologies than what we were talking about in the past. In the past, governments led the innovation. Today, AI leaders operate in the private sector, owning and operating the technologies that will change our lives, ensuring that regulation will look very different and in many ways be harder to devise. AI in many ways is also invisible. It can't be paraded around on a nation's national day like weapon systems. We can count warheads, we can count delivery vehicles, we can trace fissile material. AI is less visible. It travels through algorithms and networks rather than submarines, trains, and airplanes. And the scientific community is no longer holds the sway of their predecessors, and AI is coming into full blossom as trust in experts is decreasing. So what can we learn? Here's a few lessons I think that we can begin to think about. Lesson 1, it is never easy to constrain technology and build global architectures. So we need to be clear about our expectations. This is going to be very difficult. Science and tech leaders don't operate in a vacuum. Oppenheimer, the scientist, was ultimately cast aside, stripped of his security clearance when his political views on how best to constrain the spread of nuclear weapons fell out of political favor. Just as Anthony Fauci, America's leading scientific voice during COVID pandemic, faced death threats, science leaders are often celebrated as they innovate and build, but torn down when they advocate restraint or limitations on the technology they understand best. So this is going to be hard. It's also going to be hard because science leaders don't speak with one voice. Scientists themselves are not a monolithic group, and experts have differing views on risk and how to manage it. This often confuses the public and politicians, as we want the answers to our political challenges to be as clear as the science. It never is. In the 1950s, for example, most leading scientists sided with Oppenheimer on his desire to constrain the American development of nuclear weapons, but certainly not all. Edward Teller and his followers, for example, thought that developing the hydrogen bomb was necessary to ensure an American advantage over the Soviets, whereas Oppenheimer and others believed that atomic weapons that we had were as powerful as the US needed them to be in order to maintain a global edge. Today, similar disagreements are taking place among, say, climate scientists who are very split on if and how geoengineering will play out in our fight against climate change, and if and how much regulation, for example, should be imposed on bioengineers. Is a huge fight within the bio community. In the AI space, there's a growing divide about whether AI could pose an existential threat, and even if not existential, how dangerous it will be, and what their responsibility is for restraining development. So this is going to be difficult. But notwithstanding disagreements, scientists are able to create unique networks and institutions that can provide the foundation for building institutions of global governance. During the 40s and 50s, the nuclear scientists created organizations like Pugwash, or my organization, the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists, organizations like Physicians for Social Responsibilities, and others that help shape public opinion and policy formation for decades to come. In AI today, I mentioned the letters that scientists have signed. 2 letters recently have drafted that have prompted these tens of thousands of signatures, many from leading scientists. It's prompted attention around the world. We're still in the very early days of creating new networks and institutions to call attention to the promise and perils of AI. But I suspect we'll see them forming, and the seeds of tomorrow's regulations are being sown today. So lesson 3, through such networks, scientists can provide the seeds of global cooperation and regulation, and can sometimes operate somewhat independently of geopolitics. In 1945, physicists and then other leading scientists led the calls for regulation and developing breakthrough verification technologies. Today, AI tech leaders are identifying areas of possible control, laying breadcrumbs for how we may ultimately regulate AI. They are, for example, recommending new kinds of auditing standards and practices. The power of the US market is still big enough to make it desirable to operate within it, and therefore governable through potential new audit techniques. New supply-side tracking and regulating opportunities are being laid out for us. For example, only a handful of companies can produce the chips required for the massive computing power required for generative AI. These can be tracked, monitored, and verified. There are perhaps analogs to tracking fissile material. They're also calling for new avenues of legal scholarship and the need to create laws that hold AI companies responsible for harms they cause. Lesson 4, scientists can't do this alone, and they never could. There is a reason that many are referring to now as AI's Oppenheimer moment. Tech leaders are telling us they are concerned. They are telling us they are worried. They can see where the science is going. They know it is going to be very difficult to stop, and they can see the harms just as they can see the benefits. They are telling us that we need to get our act together. When they tell us we should be concerned, we should be listening to them. But they will not solve these problems for us, and they cannot solve them without us. What we know from the past is that scientists and today tech leaders can tell us about the technologies and identify the dangers, which is important. But they will need the help of artists, journalists, religious leaders, community activists, and others who are more able to speak to people's hearts and who can connect to political action. It is said that war is too important to leave to the generals, and by extension, the regulation of scientific innovation is too important to leave to the scientists. And lesson 5, and my last one for you today, is that if we can't manage the risks, we are unlikely to harness all of the potential benefits. There's an important parallel for nuclear power. In a carbon-constrained world in which we live, we need nuclear power. Without figuring out how to manage its risks of storage and theft, we can't fully access it. And I know that's a debate you're having here in Korea today. So we have to think about how we manage the risks of AI so that we'll be able to fully access all the benefits that it promises. So in conclusion, scientists and experts have a role to play in establishing global governance. And there's much we can learn from our nuclear predecessors that we can apply to our current AI moment. These are very difficult times and the headwinds are strong. But we do have guides from our past that we can lean on, and they are telling us that we must have determination, patience, and conviction. And with that, we have an opportunity to ensure that science advances human existence and doesn't undermine it. Thank you.
Right, thank you so much. I mean, it is quite a challenging presentation because she introduced 5 lessons on the basis of the atomic scientists who collaborate internationally for using peacefully the atomic weapon, yes, during the 1950s, 60s, 70s. So on the basis of the collective experience of atomic scientists, she proposed how can we collaborate, internationally collaborate in the field of AI. Yes, yes, there are many fears, but there are many benefits. So please ask some question after second presentation. Right, thank you again. And let me kindly introduce our second presenter, Professor Sang-ook Kim. He is at Seoul National University. Let's have a big applause to him.
Thank you very much, Professor Cho. I'm Sang-ok Park, not Kim, from Seoul National University. I feel very honored to be a part of this Kim Dae-jung Peace Conference 2023. If I may, I'd like to present in Korean to deliver my message more clearly. But I will respond in English if there are questions after my presentation. So dear international guests, please use your receivers. Okay.
So it is a very important subject, and I am more than honored and glad to be presenting in front of you. In fact, it's the first time for me to do this kind of a presentation in this kind of a forum because I did not really have much of the opportunity to talk about S&T, science and technology, and peace. And of course, I was with Mr. Kim Dae-jung and President Kim about his pacifism, and I was glad to be invited to this forum to talk about science and technology and the global solidarity for peace. And I would like to focus on the global responsibility and global peace related to science and technologies. So actually, science and technology and the relationship with warfare, I mean, there were many researches that have been conducted. Some people say that science and technology contributed to the development of warfare. And actually, yes, science and technology contributed to some extent to warfare rather than peace. Yes, it is a fact. And since the Second World War, and during this long period of the Cold War, there were conflicts between ideologies, and science and technology were used as tools for those systems and ideologies. It was more like a pride game. And there was this big competition of science and technology, and science and technologies were used as important tools. And even not only before the Cold War, but also after the Cold War, science and technology was also used for economic growth. Since the 1980s, when the ICT technology created this so-called new economy or new growth, that phenomenon continued until now. And at the same time, neoliberalism since the 1980s and free trade and trade wars between industrialized countries have become prevalent. And now science and technology's most important mission is to contribute to economic growth. And so the science and technology policies were to innovate the national systems, meaning that in order to innovate the country, science and technologies were to be used. And that was the focus of the Science and Technology Circle, and that idea was prevalent in that circle. However, unfortunately, there weren't many approaches saying that science and technology can contribute to achieve peace, because science and technology was considered to be more like a tool to be used to make a country prosper or to be economically growing. And nobody really said or talked much about science and technology contributing to achieving peace. So scientists and technology or technicians, they like peace. And so the technologies that they develop, they do not want those technologies to be misused or abused or to have a negative impact on humanity. Nevertheless, scientists and people, they didn't really do much of the activities saying that the technology should be used for peace. And especially countries like Korea that are newly emerging countries, they were reluctant in doing so. And Ms. Bronson also just mentioned earlier, those peace-contributing activities were mostly relying on those personal activities of the scientists. There weren't any state-controlled or state-managed activities, and that is why that was more like an unfortunate thing to say. However, I would like to say today that science and technology has been contributing to achieving peace. I would like you to remember that. Peace is not only about avoiding any conflicts between countries, but it's more about the security and welfare of humanity and contributing to the quality of lives of people. So there's more like a broader meaning and sense of peace. So these are a couple of activities that science and technology had contributed to achieve for peace. So they've enhanced human rights. For instance, absolute poverty and hunger was decreased because of science and technology, and public health and safety was also improved because of science and technology. And also the freedom of speech and information access, democracy, all those aspects were improved. And that directly improved democracy of many countries. And also science and technology contributed to improving public education. And so science and technology contributed to equity and providing more opportunities to humanity. I would like to stress that fact. And UNESCO, for instance, says that science and technology has contributed a lot to human lives, and there are many reports about those aspects. And now to be a little bit more abstract, science and technology has ended irrational oppression and helped reduce discriminations. For instance, Before the 18th century, in the medieval age of Europe, there were witch hunts, which are irrational oppression. But because of science and technology and the revolution, enlightenment became possible. And that kind of irrational oppression was removed thanks to science and technology. Of course, there were times when science went down the wrong path. For instance, there was eugenics, which is more like a fake science, and that is also one of a stain of science history. And it was also denied by self-purification mechanism of science and technology. And nowadays, nobody says that because one is genetically different, that someone is superior or not. No one can say that anymore. And also, thanks to the development of many studies, diversity or the value of diversity has been proven. And especially during the COVID pandemic, we were able to realize that resilience is important. And to improve resilience, it is all based on diversity. And we cannot judge people because of their genetical aspects. And because of that approach, social classes, whether they are high or low, all those social classes have been removed. And I believe that science and technology had contributed to that aspect as well. So science and technology has also made the industrial revolutions possible. Now we are facing the fourth industrial revolution. But before the revolutions, it was more like an era of land and battles for land. And back then, land was the most important asset, and labor or people were important because they were the ones working on the land. And in the past, to grow an empire, it was imperative for the country to invade another country to make it theirs. And there was a battle. There were battles for land. However, because of science and technology and the industrial revolutions, since then, countries did not have to fight for land anymore. For instance, Korea is a small country, but because of its strength in science and technology, Korea has grown into a powerful country that can compete with other advanced countries thanks to science and technology. So compared to the past, we no longer are in battles for land or engaged in disputes for land. So we live in that kind of a world these days. Of course, there are some geopolitical reasons as well, and that's why there are some wars still going on. However, at least we do not have to fight for land anymore. And now with the development of science and technology, the Western society had seen collisions ending between Protestants and the Catholic. For instance, in the past, there were strong conflicts between the Protestants and the Catholic. However, with the development of science and technology, the European region, we can say, had almost ended the collisions between those two religions. And of course, we cannot say that the religious conflicts are now gone, because there's still cultural conflicts going on, and there are some religious conflicts still going on. However, we can say that in some countries or more secular countries, that religious conflicts are much more less than in the past. And people don't have to kill each other because they have different religions, because they live in a more civilized world compared to the past. And also, science and technology has eased ideological conflicts. There are the capitalist markets and the communist markets, and there used to be a lot of conflicts between those two blocks. However, I believe that the free economic bloc won. And nowadays, the communist countries also try to promote capitalist kind of structures. That is why I believe that the ideological conflicts between these blocs have become much less than the past. And science and technology also contributes to protecting peace. With the development of the ICT technologies, now we can monitor the movements of our enemies, and also we can use satellites or other surveillance devices, equipments, and also using our mobile phones or the social network services, we can also broadcast or see the live broadcasting of warfares. And that is why countries can no longer engage in war actively than in the past. For instance, we have a lot of surveillance equipment, so because of that, we always monitor the movements of North Korea. And so we can detect early what movements are made by North Korea, and we can prevent or avoid any wars. And paradoxically, the threat of nuclear bombs, because of the mutually assured destruction mechanism, we can deter wars. And this is not desirable, or for some non-desirable weapons, there are many treaties against those inhumane weapons so that those weapons are not easily used. So we can see that science and technology had also contributed to achieving peace. It didn't always was a hurdle for peace. So now we have to think about how we can make sure that science and technology plays a more proactive role in achieving peace. So these days, science and technology reflect more values than in the past. Traditional economic and security-related values are, of course, reflected, but also gender equality, gender innovation, genders and S&T, diversity, and social aspects are much reflected in many of the science and technology activities. And also research ethics, and also bioethics or AI are leading us to make sure that science and technology should be accountable and responsible. So scientists also, they think about social responsibility more than the past. So scientists, as they move forward, they will have to face any myths and conspiracies. And also they will have to face still bias and polarization of the society. And also they will have to be careful of pseudoscience as well. Not only that, they will have to make sure that they contribute to ending poverty and hunger. And also guard rationalism, and also protect human dignity and humanitarianism. So those are the missions of our scientists and engineers of these days. Unfortunately, because of the tech supremacy race between the US and China, we're almost seeing another kind of a Cold War. And so there are rising concerns in many countries, and Korea also says that we need to protect our tech supremacy or tech sovereignty. Tech sovereignty is a good concept. It's about developing our technologies and be sure that we can develop and procure those technologies within ourselves. It's a good notion, but if used wrongly, then it can be misused. And so scientists and engineers, they shouldn't misunderstand the concept of tech sovereignty. Rather, they should make sure that they will strengthen tech cooperation with other countries. And also, science and technology will have to confront social and environmental issues. For the past 200 years, science and technology had led economic growth, and economic growth was actually the priority. However, these days, as we face climate crisis, aging societies, and AI, we are in the midst of transformations and changes, and now it is time for science and technology to take an active role to respond to those issues. So we need to focus on R&D and innovation, and especially focus on all those grand challenges from the society and environment. And when addressing those issues, economic growth can also be achieved. So I believe that the priorities should be changed. And by changing, I believe that changing this priority is called the new 3.0 framework across the S&T circle. Science and technology should be more open, transparent, and it should be engaged by the civil society. Because only by doing so, science and technology can be more accountable and responsible. So not only should science and technology work for the civil society, but it should also be engaged by civil society. And to do so, scientists should come out of their labs and they should do proactive efforts with the civil society. Science and technology, including AI and high technologies, should be aware of these possible abuse of technologies and provide precautions. For instance, AI, for instance, deepfake or algorithm-based biases or hallucinations. There are many biases or confirmation biases that can occur from AIs. So the scientists from the world should, of course, they are making efforts to create accountable and responsible AI, but that's not enough. They should work together, and through this kind of a solidarity, they should focus and highlight the responsibility of AI and create a governance structure, and also do some regulation if possible, starting from the technology development phase. They should be aware of all these aspects to develop the AI technology. And lastly, I would like to talk about how S&T or science and technology can achieve or contribute to achieving peace. So I would like to make a couple of proposals. So science and technology in the future will have to consider peace as its priority and mission. Tech supremacy or tech sovereignty are some notions that are prevalent these days, but scientists shouldn't work for only some certain governments or politics, but they should work for peace. And for the sake of peace, scientists should always remember that fact. And countries, of course, compete against each other. And we need to make sure that we can complement that system and create a more global, innovative community. And so scientists, as they move forward, they should develop science and technology for peace, and they should create a system of solidarity, and also prevent any misuse and abuse of science and technology and actively address any of those misuses. And the scientists should consider and should know that they are accountable, and they should not give that burden to the politicians. So starting from the development phase, they should be active and be responsible in what they are developing. So I hope that the scientists can work together and that they can create technologies for peace. That is the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Right. Thank you very much. Yes, speech. You suggest the Seoul Manifesto then many people want to know about Seoul Manifesto, what is the contents is about. Right. This is time for question and answer. So please ask some question to speakers. Right, please.
Hi, I'm here.
Yes, please.
I actually have a question for Richard Bronson. It's a little bit of a provocative question. So I remember reading one article. I swear I read this article. I don't remember who wrote it, but that was saying that the peace we have today somehow is the byproduct of the nuclear deterrent. The fact that we could annihilate each other somehow provided peace in the last 50, 60 years. So that was the thesis of this article. And as a consequence of this is the fact that the knowledge of how to build a nuclear weapon was enough widespread such that people could build it and then it became a deterrent. Now, one viewpoint was about the fact that we should contain or somehow manage this kind of spread of knowledge. And if we apply that to AI, I was wondering, wouldn't you think that if we were to somehow manage to, let's say, limit the diffusion of AI and so on, would we not perhaps by byproduct empowering just a few players to actually have that knowledge and make it more dangerous? So in somehow not having a deterrent to having multiple AIs out there. Does it kind of make sense? I tried to draw the analogy from the nuclear deterrent and apply that to the AI. Thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you for that question. Trying to think through how to best answer that. I think when I talk about the need for global governance, it's an effort to restrict or make accountable kind of the most dangerous aspects of the technology so that the more positive aspects of it can flourish. Right, so in the nuclear realm, even in a world of mutually assured destruction, there's still an effort to reduce the amounts of weapons each side had, right? And so that was the whole last half of the 20th century, and it continues to this day. Is how do you for many, how do you maintain mutually assured destruction but bring down the numbers? How do you reduce the risk within that context? And so for artificial, so you can still have, you can still be trying to figure out how to restrain the risk of it. But I'm much more interested, for example, in actually thinking about nuclear power as an example. To me, nuclear power is this fascinating example. The civilian use of nuclear power, you all rely on it here in Korea. We rely on it in the United States. We really should have considerably more nuclear power in this carbon-constrained environment in which we're living in, right? But you can't be trading one existential threat for another until we can figure out how to manage the risks. We really don't access all the benefits. And I just think of that in where we're going with artificial intelligence, where we're going with biological research. There's so much positive that it's promising, but there's also so much risk. And unless we can figure out how to manage that risk, we're not going to be able to access all the benefits. And so when I think of global governance, that's why I was talking in my talk about the different things that AI leaders are beginning to think about, like how do we penalize dangerous developments? How do we hold AI companies responsible for some of the harms that they're likely to create? How do we create structures so the technology is really bringing kind of the peace or the benefits that we were talking about? So I think that's where I think that we need to be going. And it's not about limiting the diffusion of the benefits. It's actually trying to figure out how you do diffuse the benefits, and we need to do that by trying to limit the risks and harms that it'll cause. So it is a provocative question, but I hope that helps.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, I want to ask one question to you. Yes. I mean, I wonder whether you know about the World Science Day designated by the UNESCO from 2001. Both of you, I'm asking, it's a World Science Day for Peace and Development. So have you know about this day? How about Rachel? Have you heard about that?
I've heard about it. I've heard there's a lot of different like science days and festivals that go on kind of around the country and the world, and I know the kind of promulgation of these ideas to like celebrate the benefits of science.
Yes.
Yeah.
How about the Professor Park? Have you heard about the World Science Day for Peace?
I haven't. Maybe they need more dissemination.
Right. I mean, yes, today is not science for scientists, not science for policymakers. It's science for all, science to all the people. That means the public awareness of science is very, very important. That's why in 1999, in Budapest, World Science gathered together and they designated one day, 10th of November, it's a World Science Day for Peace and Development. Actually, when I work at the Korea Science Foundation, it was celebrated once, but after that, nobody celebrates that day. I think that's one starting point to do something to make people to know about how can science and technology contribute to the humanity, to the world peace, something like that. So I want to, suggest my knowledge about this. Right, okay, let's come back to you. The lady, yep.
Two questions. One is about US-China tech competitions. Even when AI is intervened, do you think the previous global structure of US and China tech competition structure or any problems entailed by that could be changed? 그러니까 제 질문은 AI가 개입했.
My question is that the conflicts between US and China, do you think that there could be some other variables because of the emergence of AI, because China's AI technology? Do you think that China has maybe an advantage about AI over US?
It's very easy to ignore the problem, like with benign neglect, whatever it is. You can just easily ignore thinking that as if there's no problem or the problem doesn't exist on the Korean Peninsula. But the numbers will grow, obviously, in terms of like a nuclear or warhead. What do you think about the current strategy, just running the parallel for the long time in terms of like a North Korean arms control? Thank you.
I think the U.S. and China are in a significant competition around technology and technological innovation, and I think and I think as we've seen, it's very difficult to find any kind of resolution or any efforts to kind of contain that competition, and I think it's leading to the future warfare in space and elsewhere that the Russians and the Chinese will be a part of. It's very difficult. Many people are working on it. It's not really advancing, but we really can't give up. And that's where also I just go back to some precedent on this. When it was extremely difficult for the US and the Soviets to find ways to engage, there was long periods of kind of hopelessness. But we just have to stay at it, and we have to keep figuring out where there's overlapping interests. Can we find them? But right now, we're kind of in an unabashed technological race, which is why we need to be thinking about how to manage it. We haven't found the key yet.
Well, I'm not the best person to give answer for your second question. I know nothing about North Korea. But about your first question, artificial intelligence can provide us with a very different dimension to modern warfare. And China's strength lies on the utilization of the public data, because for the current artificial intelligence technology, machine learning is the key, and the big amount of accessible data is very critical for developing the machine learning. So unlike the US and other Western European countries, Chinese government might not put much attention to the privacy issues and kind of a situation. The artificial intelligence is very short cycle technologies, so can the China may develop artificial intelligence technology very rapidly. So, and imagine the drones which are operated by artificial intelligence that can change the modern warfare very much. So I got worried about the possibility that the addition of artificial intelligence technologies to the battlefield phenomena can make it worse, to become kind of a new dimension of threat to the peace. Yeah, that's my answer.
Right, thank you. And yes, Professor, President Peck.
This is not a question, but a suggestion. Professor Park, you pointed out the need to prepare for the Seoul manifesto on science and technology for peace. We at the Kim Dae-jung Peace Forum will continue to support the establishment of international cooperation system of science technology for peace. So what about preparing for Kim Dae-jung Peace Forum manifesto on science technology for peace? This is just a suggestion for you.
Let me do, because my question is the same. So I mean, Russell-Einstein Manifesto in 1955, it's about the atomic energy uses, right? So I think, what do you want to include in the Seoul Manifesto? It's a very important suggestion, right?
I think I made a mistake to put Seoul everywhere. So, I'm very happy to change the notion of Seoul Manifesto into Kim Dae-jung Manifesto or Sinan Mokpo Manifesto for peace. And I cannot agree more. Thank you very much. Yes, I haven't worked for the draft of the manuscript yet. I'm just proposed, but I think I had made kind of outline from my speech.
Thank you so much. Yes, the time is up. So let's give two presenters, give a big applause again. Thank you very much. Right, thank you.